Let's begin. Today's daf is daf Chav Ches Amar Aleph. We are up to the very bottom of the page. We're discussing different Tanoim and or Amoraim. What exactly what was the secret of their long lives? The Pams de Leon looking for the fountain of youth. What did they do? So each one was machmir in different areas when they went beyond the letter of the law, and it wasn't just machmir. They made it like their obsession, like make sure you always have wine for Kiddush, no matter how impoverished they were, how destitute they were, and so on. So we're up to the bottom of the page. Shaulu Talmidav is Rapreda. The Talmidim asked Rapreda, Bameh he'erachta yamim. What is it that you was zeichet to live such a long life? And when we say a long life, he actually lived an extremely long life. He lived 400 years. Amalehem. They said to him, what do you call it? I was always first in the Beis HaMedrash to learn. I never, when it came to, for example, benching, I never did the mezuzah if there was a kohen there. The kohen always did the mezuzah. And now this is how Rashi, we'll come back to that. If there was an animal that they haven't yet given the three parts of the animal that go to a kohen, the matnas kuna, which is the foreleg, the right foreleg, and the l'chaim, the jaw, and the cave in the stomach. If they didn't give it, I wouldn't eat from any other part of the animal. Even though api halacha, it's not like truma. If you don't give truma, you cannot eat from the produce at all, because the entire produce is called tevel. By an animal, we don't say that, but I was machmir. Rabbi Yitzchak said, you're not allowed to eat from behemoth, you didn't give the truma, so I wouldn't eat from it. Rabbi Yitzchak is the one who advocates this opinion that you're not allowed to eat from an animal if you didn't yet give to the kohen his due, and whoever eats from a behemoth that you didn't give the kohen his due, as if you're eating tevel. As if you're eating just like you didn't give truma. The truth of the matter is, I said Allah is not like him, but I was machmir. I wouldn't. Says the Gemara. Let's understand. You said you never benched, you never led the benching. You always allowed the kohen to lead the benching. Is that such a noble thing? The member of the Malyusi, you tell me to marry. It depends. If the kohen is a Talmud Chacham, okay, of course the kohen should come first. But if the kohen is Namaoretz, it's an insult. Not to you personally, but the station that you have, which is covered HaTorah, and you're insulting covered HaTorah. So therefore, in fact, he should have benched. Any Talmud Chacham that allows other people to bench in front of him, even a Kohen Gadol, that Talmud Chacham is chayiv misa because he insulted the cover of Torah. Shneimar says, "Kol misanai ohavim." All those who hate me love death. And I'll take them misanai. Don't read those who hate me. Elam masniya, those who make other people hate me. Those who lose respect in Hashem because of you. You're chayiv misa. So he answers back, Kika Omar Iyu B'Shavin. So Rapreda was talking about a kohen that was equal to him. He always allowed the kohen first. If the kohen was not Maritz, he wouldn't. Tosha says it doesn't mean equal to him, because equal to him, that's halacha. The kohen always comes first. It means if the kohen at least was into learning, and even though as a Talmud Chacham, he was a far lower caliber than you were, but as long as he's into learning, fine. Then you gave him the chashivas, even though halacha maybe you don't have to be, gave him the chashivas. But the Namaretz, he did not give the chashivas at all. And now, why would we allow Rapreda to go first? Because we already had mentioned before that we need that all the other kohenim should be subordinate. When we had Rav Huna used to get the aliyah of kohen, because even Rab Amri and Rab Asi, who kohen chashiva, felt subordinate to him. So maybe the same things over here as well. Because Tosis is learning, we're not talking about benching here, we're talking about aliyahs. When it comes to aliyahs, if a Yisrael should get the first aliyah, it's only if all the kohen in the world are subordinate to him and that he's chief Talmud Chacham in the world. Then Tosis makes an interesting thing. Maybe this whole rule that a kohen has to be first only is limited to Shabbos and Yom Tov. You have a big crowd, and because of Darkei Shalom, we can have all kinds of arguments who should get what aliyah. So therefore, we made this protocol. However, on Mondays and Thursdays, where you barely have a minyan, then it doesn't matter who gets the first aliyah and who gets the second aliyah. Even though, The Yisrael can get an aliyah before Kohen, even if he's not such a great man. Maybe not an Amoris, but a bit of a Talmud Chacham, but doesn't have to be that great. So Taisa makes a distinction Monday and Thursday and Shabbos. However, Rashi learns we're not talking about at all about Kriyas HaTorah, which has to do with Darkei Shalom. All the reasons we're learning getting some of there, all those reasons to do with Darkei Shalom. Here we come to benching. That benching has nothing to do with Darkei Shalom. It's the rule that the Kohen should get first position. And nevertheless, if the Kohen, however, is not Maris, then Torah gets the first position. But Apreda allowed a Kohen who's a lower caliber, as long as it's into learning, to be before him. Okay. Tosfos already reminds us that in Gemara Dora we learned that Apreda was granted a long life for a different reason altogether. He had a custom that he would learn with his Talmud 400 times, revise every single thing he learned 400 times. And there was one Talmud that he learned him 400 times, and then after the end he said he still doesn't understand. And Rapeta had to go away somewhere, but he stayed behind in order to revise him another 400 times. So Basko came out from heaven and said that, would you like that the entire generation should get Olam Haba, or would you like long life? And we should add you, and you should live for 400 years, corresponding to the 400 times that you revise with the students. And Rapeta chose that everyone should go to Olam Haba. And the Abishai said, you know what? Ha. We'll give you both. And so Tosfos says, so what's our Gemara saying? A whole different story why that Preda lived a long life. So Tosfos answers that Preda was not aware that Hashem granted him both brachas. He thought he'll only get one bracha. And in fact, he's living long is due to this other reason. It was only later on he realized that David gave him the second bracha as well. Says him further, what was your secret while you live a long life? If I ever saw that my friend was being put down, and rightfully so, I never sort of exploited that situation for my advantage. I never went to sleep bearing grudges against any of my friends. And equally, I was a very profligate person. I was a very generous person. I was the opposite of stingy. And the Gemara explains, I didn't in any way, gain anything from someone else's downfall. He was carrying a shovel on his shoulder. Also, Rab Chana Bar Chanilai saw it because he said, why don't you give me the shovel? I'll carry it on your behalf. You're a big Talmud Chacham. It's a pasnish. It's not appropriate. Amalei Shavuna said to him, if in your town you normally carry things on your shoulder, know what people saw you already previously carrying things, then fine. I'll be very kind of you. But viloi, if you don't normally carry, so you're prepared to humiliate yourself so that I shouldn't have to carry the shovel. You want me to have more covered on your expense, that I don't accept. Also on the Tosik, I never bore a grudge when I went to sleep against any of my friends. Everyone went to bed. But he would say, I'm Meichel, everybody who caused me pain today, I am Meichel before I go to sleep. You see, I was very generous with my money. Eve was very generous. He always gave tips. Even though he paid the full price, he would give a tip as well to the person. He was very generous with his money. And it's a very good habit to have, to be generous. Rabbi Akiva once asked him, they say he's the same person, but Rabbi Akiva once asked him, so how come you're living such a long life? And the students of Rabbi Nechunya thought that Rabbi Akiva was couldn't take the fact that Rabbi Nechunya is living such a long life. It's envious, or also goes of the goes. So along came over, his students or his entourage or his servants, the kamachole, and they started to beat Rabbi Akiva. Because what? It bothers you that our Rebbe is living such a long life? Wait, what do you begrudge him such a long life for? Solly, so Rabbi Akiva ran in a Yossi Vareshis, he climbed the top of a palm tree. How he got to the top of a palm tree with no branches, quite a difficult task. Rebbe, he then shouted out to Rebbe, tell me, I'm confused on the pasuk. It says in the pasuk, it says keves. If it says in the pasuk keves that you should bring, for a carbon tamid, in the morning and night. It says you should bring keves a single. So we know it means a single sheep. So why does it take to spell out keves echad, a single sheep? Lama never echad, say one. So why? He's a Talmud Chacham, and he's only asking because he wants to know how to replicate it as well. Shavku even be. Amalei, then told him, why it says echad? You should have a sheep, but more than that, it should be the best sheep in your flock. Even though we have a general mitzvah, hidden mitzvah, you should always try to do everything nice, but that is separate from the mitzvah. Here, by the cover tamid, within the parameters of the mitzvah itself, you should take the miyuchid shebedrei, the best of the flock. Amalei, now he responds to Mekiva. You want to know why I live a long life? I'll tell you my habits. My good habits. I never accepted gifts from anyone. We'll talk about in a minute. Nor did I ever stand on my principles. Even though I'm right, I would give in. And again, so Gemara seems to really promote this idea that one should be very generous with the money and not be so stingy and skimpy. And like a balti matan, I didn't accept gifts. Rabbi said, whenever they sent him gifts, the Bainasir from the house of the Nasi, he refused to accept it. When they invited him to a meal, he wouldn't go. He would send them back a message. It bothered you that I'm going to live a long life. It says, if you hate taking gifts, you will live a long life. So why are you forcing me to cut down my years of my life? Now, the Semer writes a Cheshem Mishpat that the reason for, if I remember correctly, he says the reason why Soinem Atanzichi is the moment you start taking gifts from people, you feel beholden. And once you feel beholden, you cannot ever speak to them what you truly feel. If you feel they're not behaving the way they should be, you're not going to say anything because you feel beholden to them. So you really imprison yourself, you change yourself. And therefore, if you don't take gifts from anybody, beholden to nobody, and therefore you can be free and say your piece. Rabbi Zayda, same thing happened to Rabbi Zayda. He had the same baby. They would send him gifts from the house of the Nasi. Shakal refused to take it. But when they invited him to a meal, Azal he would go. Ahmad, he said, you think I'm taking? I'm giving. Is Yakuridim is Yakribi. Certain people, they come to your simcha, they actually add to simcha just by their presence. They're very chashuv people, very eminent people. By being there, they're adding to your simcha. So when I go to the Nasi's house for a meal, I'm not taking them, I'm giving them my presence. That's what he's saying. So basically, there's a famous question everybody asks. So how can a poor man take tzedakah? It says in Pasuk, Soinem Atanasichya. So the answer is because more than what the poor man is taking, he's giving. Giving the person who's giving tzedakah is giving that donor the chance to do a big mitzvah, the mitzvah of tzedakah. So Yoisem Masha'ani, Yoisem Labal, Yoisem Masha'abal, Yoisem Labal. So therefore, the same thing over here. That's why, and that's what Zayda is saying here. That if you're accepting a gift, is actually taking, is actually giving, then it's all right. We say that a woman, man has to give a woman a gift, but if she's a very eminent person, if she gives him a gift and he accepts it, it's a good kedushin because he gave her the pleasure that he accepted her gift. Anyway, the Gemara continues further. I never stood on my principles. Rava said, we had this on a number of occasions already, that Rava said, that anybody who's prepared to bypass his principles and not stand his ground, all of his sins will be atoned for. Remember, it says, he'll forgive his sins, and he'll go cross over the deliberate sins. Who will Hashem atone? Someone is prepared to be al pesha. Someone is prepared to go again to overcome his principles. Shol Rebbe Asaf Shurkarcha. Rebbe wants Asaf Shurkarcha. There's one view. Rashi is actually the view that Shurkarcha was Rabbi Akiva's son, and Korcha was Rabbi Akiva, and he used to call him Korcha, which means a baldy. Tosfos finds that highly inappropriate and highly improbable that they were referred to Rabbi Akiva by a nickname, especially we just had before. Yesterday, you're not supposed to call anybody by nicknames. Especially derogatory. What's Rebbe asked Rabbi Korcha, how do you live a long life? What bothers you that I'm living a long life? Rebbe, no. Famous saying, this is Torah. I want to learn from you what you did right, so I can replicate it. I just want to live a long life. This is Rebbe said. So he said to him, He said, I never looked at the face of a Russia. The Amar Rabbi Yechon, Asur la'adam lihistakel b'tzelem Russia. You're not allowed to look in the form of a person who is a Russia. You're not allowed to look in their face. The Rabbi Akiva Eiger says there's a difference between histakel and ria. Ria means to have a glance. Histakel means to sit there and dwell on it and focus on it. So of course you'll look at a Russia, but now be mistakel and to look at it a long time. B'tzelem Russia. Remember it says there that Lule Prei Yehishafat Melech Yehuda Ani Noise. It says that Elisha said, if it wouldn't be for Eliosef, if it wouldn't be for the fact that you are together with Yehoshaphat, Elisha saying this to Yehoram. Yehoshaphat and Yehoram went together to Elisha because they had a war against Ammon. They went together to Elisha, and Elisha said, if it wouldn't have been for the fact that Pnei Yehoshaphat Yudani knows who I curry his favor and I respect, Im Abid Alecha, I look at you, Be Medeka. Now, very interesting. The pasuk that we use to learn out that you're not allowed to look at a Russia, which is from Elisha, uses the word ereka and abit, habata, which means a look. And yet the Gemara changes it from ereka to histakel. And Rabbi Akiva points out that histakel means you're allowed to have a look, but you're not allowed to look for a long time. And maybe this explains why Shulchan Aruch does not bring down this halacha anyway. Megilah Daf brings it down, but in Shulchan Aruch, nobody brings down this halacha, you're not allowed to look in the face of a Russia. Because maybe the halacha and the pasuk that you learn from is a bit tenuous. Because there it says rei, and you come along and say histakel. Where did the Megilah get histakel from? If you're learning from the pasuk, you shouldn't even have a glance. Rabbi Lezer says ein of kois. Rabbi Lezer says your eyes become dim. Shneimar says Yitzchak when you're older, but his eye became dim. Why? We should histakel be'esav Russia. Must be because he constantly was present with Esav Russia, and you looked at him a long time. So he became blind. Didn't we learn also the reason is Rabbi Yitzchak said, we had it before already. Never treat the klala of an ordinary person lightly. Abimelech cursed out Sarah for her behavior, not telling him that she's a married woman. And it was fulfilled by her children. Shneimar says, here he gave her a gift. This should be to cover you. I'll take her to cover you. To dim your eyes. So Yitzchak Taka became blind. So when it says Garmle, both together caused that blindness. Rava says from here, another pasuk altogether, where it says Eis Pnei Russia, and it says Eis Pnei Russia, that Loitov, that's Eis Pnei Russia Loitov. We put a stop over there, even though the pasuk says it goes on further. He says, well, to look at the Pnei Russia is not good. Bishas Peterosa, when Rabbi Shua was about to pass away, Rebbe came into him and said, Amalei Rebbe B'chei. They said, why don't you bench me? Very interesting Gemara here. Amalei said to him, I wish you live only half the days that I live. So he said to him, what kind of bracha is that? I shouldn't live a full life, only a part life. Amalei, Rabbi Shua said, you're the nasi. If you have a long life, then your children will never make it in life. So your kids, what do they'll become shepherds because the kids take after them, take over the role of the parents. But if you live for a very long time, by the time they're ready to take over, they'll be very old people. So therefore, my bracha is that you should let them something. That's why many people sometimes leave a Yerusha to their children before they pass away, so the children can enjoy it while they're still younger and not wait till they're, especially the privilege of a long life, but they should be very old as well. Avua bar I, Uminyamin bar I. These two brothers, Avu the son of I, Minyamin I, Chad Amar. One of them said, Teisili, give me credit, bekusi. I never was mistakel, again, looking, and concentrating, bekusi, on someone who was an idol worshiper. The Chad Amar, and one said, Teisili, give me credit, of these shutras by the kusi. I never made a partnership with the kusi. Now, in Gemara B'Chaydos, we'll have in the beginning that Shmuel said you're not allowed to have a partnership with a kusi, because if there's ever a dispute, you'll end up going to court and you'll have to swear. And you're causing a goy to swear in the name of his idol. And yet we have in Shabbos, it says, Teisili, it says in the Gemara, Teisili, give me credit that I didn't do that. Over here he says, I didn't do that. Teisili, So it seems that even though it says Asa, it doesn't really mean Asa. Torah was only a good, a noble act of doing it. Or we're talking about a case here where he said clearly we'll never have to, if there's a dispute, we'll never have to swear. So it'll never happen, it'll never come to that. And yet I still refuse to make partnership with Goyim. What did you do to live a long life? I never ever expressed anger in my house. And even if I wanted this with my kids, I feigned anger, but I never was genuinely angry. I never stepped in front of somebody who was greater than me. And I did not think Torah going through the streets if there were feces around the place. And what's the big deal? Because I constantly learn Torah. It doesn't happen that I walk for Am without Torah. And yet when it came to Mevoyes with an office, I didn't even think Torah. And I had to exercise a lot of self-control not to think Torah during walking through Mevoyes with an office. And therefore, I have credit for that. Like Phil never walked around without tefillin. I didn't sleep Beis Medrash. According to halacha, you're allowed to sleep a cat nap, a short nap. I didn't even do that. I never rejoiced if somebody, a friend of mine, got hurt. I never rejoiced for that. I never called my friend I never called them by their nickname or by their last name or by a name if it was a pejorative term. Some people say you never call them by a last name, period. You should call people by their first name. Last name is very cold, impersonal, and so on. Says the Gemara for the Mishnah. But Rabbi Yehuda before, sound like Rabbi Yehuda said before, you can sell a shul. The only time you can sell a shul and the kedusha of the shul leaves the shul and can is transferred to the money is only if you spell out that this shul will no longer be a shul, it will be used as a courtyard. So that's a big chumrah, Rabbi Yehuda. Everyone else holds, not everyone, the Chacham holds, as soon as you sell it, the kedusha leaves the shul. Except you're not doing degrading things there. But Rabbi Yehuda says, on the one hand, he's very machmir. You have to specify that this shul is no longer a shul. But then he's makeup. Once the buyer has it, they can do whatever they want. They can even turn it into something which is degrading. They can plant it. They can do whatever they want. And the Menachem hold that if it's the zayin to the ear together with the anshe ear who sell the shul, then they also can do anything you want in that shul, as degrading as it is. Okay, says the further. The basic Knesset is destroyed. If a basic Medrash is destroyed, the site is still holy, so you're not allowed to make ordinary eulogies there. You can't do your mundane activities like spinning rope. You need a big area, so you want to use the shul premises. You didn't sell it; it still has its kedusha, but it's defunct and the shul has been, demolished. The site itself is holy, so you cannot do mundane activities, nor can you create nets there. The shul is still upstanding. You cannot use it to spread your fruits there. You're still not allowed to use it as a shortcut. Remember, it says, I will destroy as if even after the destruction is still a holy site until you sell it. Because when you sell it, then the kedusha of the site or of the shul is transferred to the money. But if you don't sell it, the kedusha is still there. Where did the kedusha disappear to? Kedusha and afkesh ain't shaymin. That the kedusha is still there, even though it's destroyed. Olo by asavim, if you start to grow grass, la yitlish, you shouldn't really cut it. Or if you do cut it, we say you have to leave the cut grass there. But let people walk by and see the devastation, be reminded all the time of what happened to the shul, and maybe they'll daven that they should be successful. They have to have another shul, or they should daven to the Eibishter that things should go back to normal. Chadash shemeinu keket. Tell we learned. But you can see when it comes to a shul, ain't noigin behen kalos reish. You're not allowed to treat it lightly anyway. In a shul, ain't oichlin behen ve'ain sheisman. In a basic knesses, you're not allowed to eat, you're not allowed to drink, you're not allowed to have a tikkun, you're not allowed to have a l'chaim if it's a basic knesses. And the basic knesses we learn you don't have a mezuzah if it's a real basic knesses. Question or argument if you have water and things similar to that. The ain ne oisin behem. You're not allowed to go ahead and beautify yourself in them. You have to treat it with total respect, and the only thing you do there is davening. You're not allowed to spend time there just to sit there and shpatzir. You're not allowed to walk in there if it's very hot outside. It's good exercising in the shul, so you want to walk and just sit there. Or if it's raining, you go and sit for cover. The aim must be in ben hesped yochid. For individual, I'll make a hesped there. I will koidin behen. You'll have to learn it. The shainin behen you'll chumash. You'll have mishnayos. Must be in behen hesped rabbi. You're allowed to make there a hesped in a shul if it's for a big Talmud Chacham. And you need and it's a large crowd coming, then you'll have to use the shul premises for that. Omar Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ein Masai." When is all this talking about? B'yeshuvon. He says this is talking about when the shul is upstanding. But he says here the churbanon, when the shul is destroyed, manichin oisan, you leave it where it is. V'oil ben asavim, let the grass grow. V'layitleish, and don't cut it. B'pnei agmas nefesh. Who's talking about cutting grass? It's as if he's arguing with somebody. Tanakama even raise it. Asavim man de kashmayu. Who mentioned grass at all? The Tanakama say that you do cut the grass. I mean, what's going on here? A few words are missing. This is how the Tanakama continues in a shul. That's you're not allowed to do anything in that shul, even after it's charev. And the Tanakama continues. You still have to sweep it. They used to pour water on the floors of the shul because it's all sand, and put water so the sand shouldn't fly about. In Curacao, they have the oldest shul in the West, I think. When I was there, so I was told. After the Inquisition, people went to Holland, and Curacao used to belong to Holland. So they all got these passports, and they went to Curacao, and they built themselves the most beautiful shul. Unfortunately, today it became reformed. But they have this shul, and the windows are all blue, and the floor is still just sand. And when you walk in there during the day, the entire shul inside interior is blue. It's fascinating. And but that was a sand floor, and they from time to time they would pour water over it so that the sand shouldn't move about. That's called Megilah Daf. And so they still took care of the shul. And they did this in order that you don't have weeds and grass growing there. Omar Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda, Masai, when is all this done? The shul's upstanding. Once the shul was destroyed, manichin oisan lalos, you don't have to continue sweeping. You can let the grass grow on its own. But if it grew, don't cut it. In fact, it's good that the grass grows and the weeds grow, and people will see how derelict the shul is. Maybe it'll stir them into davening to the Eibishter, that things should go back to normal. The agmas nefesh, cause them some anguish. Amar Abbas is a fascinating thing. Bate Knessia Shebabel, all the shuls in Babel, al Tanai Hein Asuim, they were all built on a condition. In other words, we just said that shuls, you're not allowed to eat or drink, but in Babel, you were allowed to eat. You were permitted to do these things in a shul, to do them. But eating and drinking, maybe not, but you're allowed to do other activities. You shouldn't do lightheaded things. Lightheaded things, the Gemara says, you're sitting there making your own personal calculations. Eating and drinking is a machlekes. Amar Rav Asi says, a shul that they sit there, make all kinds of calculations. Malina boys a mess. Well, eventually, we'll see what I mean. Right now, more things that you have to turn into a morgue and allow the corpses to lie there. Salkadatach, Malina Salkadatach, you have to put a place in there. Lo Yisagi de Lav Hachibar, a shul you have to turn into a morgue. That you'll find that in your city you'll have people suddenly dying of meis mitzvah, that no family, and it's all because the shul that you treated it without the due respect. Now here there's a fascinating machlekes between the Rishonim. Taisus comes up with a very big kiddush. Very few Rishonim agree with him, but and Shulchan brings down Taisus. That is, first of all, the big machlekes Rishonim. Are we talking about only Bavel or all? Are we talking about all shuls? So some say it's only limited to Bavel, because Bavel, that was the custom that when they built a shul, they built it on the Tanai that this shul will be holy only as long as we use it, or only holy to this extent, but no further than that. But other shuls doesn't apply, or it applies to all shuls. Taisus comes along and makes a big chiddush. It only applies to shuls in diaspora, not Net Yisrael. There's a big difference, and Shulchan passes this way. There's a big difference in a shul in Net Yisrael and a shul in Babel. Taisus says all the shuls in diaspora are temporary shuls. Mashiach will come, we're going to leave, we'll pick ourselves up, and we'll go to Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, the shuls here are only temporary. So all the shuls here are tonight, they don't have the same level of kedusha as the shul Eretz Yisrael, temporary versus permanent. So in Eretz Yisrael, you're not allowed to eat, you're not allowed to drink, you're not allowed to do anything in a shul. And in Chutz La'aretz, you're allowed to do things in a shul if it's respectful. So maybe eating, drinking, stam not, but if it's a Sudas Mitzvah, for example, maybe you're allowed to in a Beis HaKnesses. The Mishnah Berurah himself finds it a little bit difficult because most Rishonim don't make that distinction between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz and how far do we go. But that's what the Shulchan Aruch passes clearly. We don't have Alter Rebbe on this, so we don't know how the Alter Rebbe passes. And the other thing, another thing is that according to traces, the first traces makes no difference if the shul is upstanding or destroyed. It's, you're not doing anything in the shul. But traces, the second trace, Alpha Pekain, seems to be saying that only while the shul is upstanding in Israel, that we don't do anything in the shul. But once the shul is destroyed, you can do whatever you want with the shul. So it's a bit vague what exactly he's saying here. But interesting that the shuls, the Shulchan rules based on this traces here, that the shuls in the diaspora don't have the same level of kedusha as the shuls in Eretz Yisrael. Even though we learn later that in the future all the shuls will move to Eretz Yisrael. But we'll see. Talking about it further, usually go for personal use. Once Rabbeinu about the Masna have a kind of standing, they were asking Rabbi a question in learning. Also, suddenly came this downpour, idle by Knishta. They went inside the shul. Amri, they said, hi, Knishta. You should know the reason why we went to the shul. Not because of personal gain, because it was uncomfortable, we're getting wet. And so the Shmaita Beit says we're trying to learn, and if we learn and getting wet, we cannot really concentrate. That's why we went in. Like a very windy day. So therefore, we went inside the shul purely to improve our learning. So that's not for personal benefit. Says the Gemara. If a person, let's say, has to lemikre gavra beknishta, you have to go to shul to call somebody. What are you supposed to do? You have no choice. You have to walk into the shul. But how do you walk into a shul if you're going for personal need? Amalei, he says as follows: Eat tzurrim berabban if you're Talmid Chacham, blame Hilchos. Say some kind of halacha, so you're learning. Be Tanu if he knows Mishnayos, blame a Mishnah. Be Kari, he knows Chumash, blame a Psukkah. Say a pasuk. Be Loi if he doesn't know any of these, blame a leyanuka. Learn, turn to a child and say to the child, Amalei Psukkah. I want to hear say, tell me over a pasuk in learning. Doesn't have to be a child, but tell somebody else, tell me something in learning. Inami, or if you don't have anybody there, you're the only one in shul. Nishi purta benekum. Sit there for a little bit. Just sit there because it says in pasuk, Ashrei Yoshvei B'Secha. Praiseworthy are those who just sit in the shul. Just sitting in the shul is already a mitzvah. Like we have a concept called schar halicha. Just walking to shul is already a mitzvah, but you have to. If you walk to the shul, you don't go inside. You don't get schar halicha. So even if you don't daven here, you walk inside. Just being there, you have something. Umaspidin ben hesped for Rabbim. You make your hesped for Rabbim. What's considered hesped for the public? Machber Abchizda demonstrated, pointed, going hesped the koyber of sheishes. A hesped, it doesn't have to be only a hesped about a tamachach. If it's a hesped, that tamachach will be present, and therefore a lot of people will come just to honor this tamachach who's present. You can use the shul premises, and he pointed of sheishes. He's a perfect example. If he be present, everybody will come. Machver Rav Sheshes, who is humble, Kigoyin has paid the Rav Chizda. He pointed Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda would be there. Rafram Aspede le Kalose Beknishta. Rafram made a eulogy for his daughter-in-law in a shul. Amar, he said, Mishim Yukara the D, the people are going to come to honor me, and Udemisa, and also for my daughter-in-law, she was a very special woman. Also, Kuliyama, a big multitude of people will come. And therefore, you're allowed to use a shul where you have a big crowd for the covenant of Meshach. Rab Zayda once gave a eulogy to one of the rabbis in his shul. He said, the Mesa Sukuyama. Whether it's in my honor or maybe the honor of the person who's deceased, because he was also Talmid Chacham. Everybody's coming, therefore we can use the shul. Reish Lakish, who was a tough guy, he once gave a hesped to a rabbi, the Shechir Ba'ar Yisrael, that frequent Eretz Yisrael, that he would teach halachas b'chav daled shirasa. He taught halachas to 24 rows, and even though on one hand it's a big Talmid Chacham and 24 rows of students, but he was teaching halacha, which is a step lower than learning Gemara. The halacha is dry; you only know the outcome; you don't really understand the nuances. Omar, he said, "Vai chosra ada Yisrael." Woe is it that Ed Yisrael lost Gavra Rabba? What a great man! Ahuda Havitani Yechasa was another person that learned a lot more than just halachas. He knew Sifra, Sifri, Tosefta. B'shachim he died, but he didn't know really Gemara that well. Also, Amr Nachman told Nachman that he died. Nachman by Yitzchak or Nachman by Yaakov. Lishpedei Mar, why don't you give a eulogy for this person? Amr, he said, Heichi Nashpedei, you want me to give a eulogy? Hi, Tzana, this basket, the Mole Sifra. He's a basket full of svarim, but he has no idea what they are saying. He knows how halachas Sifra, these are all facts, but he doesn't understand the arguments, the debate behind it. And therefore, I have nothing to say. Now, very interesting today, if you ever see, when they write, especially if you go to Meir Sha'arim, they have every day they put up these new signs on the walls of great people who passed away. The title, when they talk about when the description of a tzaddik or a Talmud Chacham is, everyone uses tzana moli safra, a basket full of svarim. But here the Gemara uses actually not as a compliment, but as an insult. That he's a basket full of svarim, has no idea what he knows. He doesn't know what's inside them. Nevertheless, for some reason or another, it became today a compliment. To Chazi, come and see Ma Ben Kifud Yisrael. See the difference between the strong ones in Yisrael, the tough ones in Yisrael, who still have a soft heart, a soft touch. The Chassid, the bubble, the good ones in the bubble, who are tough as nails. But look, Reish Lakish, who was tough, was more than happy to eulogize somebody who was a pretty ordinary person, and Nachman, who was supposed to be a big chassid in Bavel, refused to eulogize somebody who was, even though he was quite a big Talmud Chacham. The man Hossa, we learned over there. What makes this Lakish tough? We had the end. Rashi brings at the end of Sefat Yom. We learned about Achil Hashem, and Reish Lakish would not talk to anybody in the marketplace, not even say hello, because he knew that other people would see them together. They would say, "Oh, we can trust that person." Reish Lakish would talk to him, so he wouldn't greet anyone. Very different than his brother Rabbi Yechanan, who would makdim shalom l'chol adam, and Reish Lakish did exactly the opposite, because he was very tough and very austere, and yet look, he found in him somewhere that he can compliment this Talmud Chacham, who is not just a great Talmud Chacham. Tell us we learned. Somebody uses the Torah as a crown. Cholav, that he should pass away from this world. There's a whole discussion if you're allowed to take the crown of a Sefer Torah and put it on somebody's head. Some people had a custom by Chassan to get an aliyah. They would take the crown of the Torah and put it on the head. Others say the shtamish b'taga cholav. If you use the crown, literally, you pass away. The other people argue that a chassan is a melech, and a melech wears a crown. So therefore you could. Especially on chassan Torah, chassan bereshis. I haven't seen this minute today. Tani Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish said, Zeh ha-mishtamish. What does it mean, mishtamish b'taga, using a crown? Ha-mishtamish b'mi sheshayna halachas. If you're using a Talmud Chacham who knows halacha, Kisra shel Torah, which is the crown of Torah. So the Shlokis, I guess, in a way, is consistent with what he said before, that a person who just taught halachas is also a great man, because the Shlokis says that halachas is a very great thing, like having more brachas. V'amar Ula said, Lishtamish inish b'mandatoni arbo, v'ladishtamish mad the masne abo. You can use somebody who learned 4 out of the 6 Dorim or Mishnayis, but don't use somebody who actually taught the 4 Dorim Mishnayis, because teaching is a much greater higher level than just learning for yourself. Was going his way. Mota Urkamademaya came across a river or a pool of water. Also, Gavra came along a person. Arkiva Akaspe. He lifted his luggage on his shoulder and he was going to help him cross the river. The Kamavalin was crossing this creek. Amalei Karisa, so Shlakish from the top said to the guy below, you learn Chumash? Amalei Karina, I learn Chumash. Tanisha, you learn Mishnayas? Tanina. Arba Sidri Mishnah. So he said, I learned the 4 Dharma Mishnayas, the main ones, Noshim and the Zikin and Mayed and Kachim. Kachim also there's an Indian to learn today, because whoever learns Kachim is as if he broke Kavanas. Amalei, he said, Pasal to Lecha today, you should allow for yourself 4 rows. V'ta'anad balakish a kaspach, and you're carrying the lakish a pasnish. You're a great man. Shadi balakisha b'maya. He said, "Throw me down." He calls him a third person. He says, "Toss me off of your shoulders. I don't want to use you to carry me." Amalei nichli dashmin lemar. He said, "I want to hear things from you. I want to carry. I want to hear things from you. So the Shlosh said, fine. I'll teach you something. The Amar Rav Zedi said, B'nois Yisrael, the Jewish girls, chmidu al atzmam, the Jewish girls were machmir on themselves. Shafilu royes tippers dam kechazal. Even see a drop of blood the size of a mustard seed. Yoishus olav shiva nekim. It sits in nekim. So we know you have the nida and you have the zava. The nida is an 18-day cycle. The first 7 days you're a nida, and then between 8 and 18, the 11 days you're a zava. A nida, she sees a drop of blood. She's a nida for 7 days, and she can see as much blood as you want during the 7 days. It comes the end of the 7 days. She does a hefsek taira. She makes sure that they stop bleeding, and then that night she goes to the mikveh, and that's it. It's over. A zava works differently. If she sees 1 or 2 days, she just has to separate for 1 day. But if she sees 3 consecutive days, she's now considered a zava. She has to then wait till the bleeding stops, and then she has to count 7 nikim, 7 clean days. If she sees during those 7 days, she has to start to count again. So because it was a bit complicated to keep a cheshbon, whether what you're seeing is a nida or a zava, they decided to be machmir. That if they see 1 drop of blood, so maybe they're a nida, but also they're maybe a zava. Therefore, they're a zava. They're going to see keep 7 clean days as well, which is what we do today. So we have 5 days, and then to stop the blood, and then 7 days. The question is, but a zava, if you see only 1 drop of blood, you never have to wait 7 clean days. So even if your machmir has to have some legs, what are the legs? You saw 1 drop of blood, you have to count 7 clean days. It never happens. Mahat Torah that you need 7 clean days. So if you're a nida, then you only have to wait 7 days. You don't have to be clean days. And if you're a zava, you have to see 3 days in a row. So the Rashi asked that question, and Rashi says, what happens? You're a zava. You counted 7 clean days, and on the very 7th day, you saw 1 drop. What happens? You got to start again counting 7 clean days. So here you have an instance, you saw 1 drop of blood, and you need to count 7 clean days. Or another example Rashi gives, a weaker example. Let's say 2 days you were bleeding, and you didn't realize it until the 3rd day you saw 1 drop of blood, and then suddenly you look back, you saw that you actually saw 3 days, and therefore you have 7 clean days. But it's not really the same thing, because the fact is it wasn't just 1 drop of blood. But the first answer Rashi gives, 1 drop of blood on the 7th day, you have to start to count all over again. Learns big machlekes of Elio is Elio Hanavi, or there was a yeshiva, there was an Amira someone called Elio who lived a very long life. In fact, there's an argument that Chidah brings in Pergam Al, well, I'm a base in Erech Chaim, where he brings Rash with the 2 Elios, and one was an Amira, and one was Elio, or a Tana, and one was Elio Hanavi. And this Amira Tana lived for a very long time. That's what the Gemara always talks about Elio, because he met so many different Tanim over the generations. So Tana Dvelio, Yeshiva Elio learned, anyone who learns halacha, muftach loy sheben olam haba, is guaranteed to be going to olam haba. And it says halichas olam loy. I'll take it. Do not read halichas ella halacha. The halachas gives him olam loy, guarantees him olam haba. Of course, stop here. Continue tomorrow. Mitzvah. Everyone have a good day.